Hi everyone, hello. Nice to see people already coming in. While we wait, I would love to hear everyone. Just you can put it in the chat, say hello, tell us where you're joining us from. It's always interesting to see how diverse our audience is. So feel free to use the chat, say hello, and tell us where you're connecting from. We're gonna take 1 more or 2 minutes to wait for everyone to join, and then we're gonna start it off. France, nice. Just came back from France last weekend. Always a pleasure to travel there. Hi. Okay, São Paulo, Brazil, nice. Okay, we're still waiting. What about the rest? We miss US people. Usually there are usually okay. Hi Janos. Oh hi. It's been a while since we talked. Hi Tamara. Okay, Norway, Connecticut. Okay. Okay, we have multiple people from Brazil. Wyoming. Hi. Okay, as usual, again, a very diverse audience. Missing people from Munich. Hi, Enzo. Hello. Okay, let's give it a few more seconds and then we're gonna start it off. Nice. Okay, good. I'll jump to the agenda and briefly first discuss what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to do a quick introduction after the slides, explain, of course, I know some of you already know who SignNote, what we are, what we do, but I'll do a quick introduction into SignNote, then talk about what we want, what we're going to be talking about today, what our goal is. Then we're going to briefly talk about fair data. As usual, I think this is an important part of standardization. Go through some of the challenges we found and some of the research we did, talk about SignNote solution, so what we do and where we help with templates and what you can use in SignNote to get better standardization, to improve your documentation, and then finish off with a quick summary and a Q&A session as usual. Good. Let me jump into the introduction. So welcome everyone who doesn't know us. So SignNote, our solution is an electronic lab notebook with inventory features, reporting features, and project management. We are the #1 ELN based on G2 reviews and have been for at least 3 years now. I think it's actually 4 already. We have users all over the world, as you've seen from the chat, in very different sectors. We are very proud to support both FDA and USDA in their scientific pursuits. And we always like to talk about this because this is something that we try to instill into every employee at SignNote. So we are a security first company. And that's a big part of our internal processes and also how we develop SignNote and how we work with the data that we produce as a company. Then for today, what we're going to go into, so you saw the title, so we're going to be talking about templating. Why is it important in science? What are the issues that science is actually having? Because standardization is not a big thing and we don't talk about it enough. And where does SignNote and ELNs help in general? We always started off with a poll, and this is a nice icebreaker. So I want you all, so we're going to start the poll in a few seconds. But the question we are asking today, the first one is, how does your lab currently document experiments and workflows? We just want to understand. So I know some of you already are customers, so the answer to that will be clear. But if there's something different, you'll also have the option to use other. Please share with us in the chat what exactly you're using. If you're using our competitors as well, that's good information. So I think you should already see the poll, at least I see it. Okay, good. Yeah, it's coming. Okay, paper notebooks, spreadsheets, documents. Okay. interesting results so far. So many of you are using paper notebooks and spreadsheets, so MS Office Suite. So there is one other, please just mention that in the chat as well. We would love to understand what exactly is what we missed. Okay, a new line without structured templates, a structured line with standardized templates. It would be probably funny if these all of you are using Signout and one of you said without structure and one said with standardized templates. Okay, so I'm gonna leave the poll open for 5 more seconds. Okay, I think we can close it now. End the poll, and I'm gonna share the results with everyone. So the two most, I think you should see it now. Yeah, so paper notebooks are still actually the #1 result, which is crazy. Spreadsheets as well. So in spreadsheets and documents, I completely understand that one. I think you can set up a very good system there, and you can have a good way of standardizing within MS Office Suite. And then let's say 1/3 of you replied that you have an ELN without structured templates and a structured ELN with standardized templates. So very interesting. And there was also a response that something else. So if you can share that in the chat, I would really appreciate it. And this is interesting. Okay, good. Let's jump in. Let's see if there are some things. Just a second. Okay, good. Fair data. So I'm sure all of you are aware of fair data. Wherever, if you go to any of the conferences, especially in terms of lab operations or just digitalization of labs, it's all everyone talks about. But we do think here at Signout that even if we talk about it, if it's common knowledge and everybody talks about it, it's still the basic principle that should be followed to make science better and more reproducible. Even if it's simple, there's a lot in there that really makes standardization and reproducibility possible. So data should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. This is a very important thing. I know we all talk about it, but I really want everyone, if there's one thing you're going to remember, you should remember that whenever you're doing and working on documentation, standardization, keep fair data in your minds. Now let's jump into the research we did. So whenever we do these webinars, we go around, we research, we talk with our customers, we talk with our team and try to gather really information from everywhere about this specific topic or challenge. And some of the numbers that we saw in terms of reproducibility and standardizations were concerning. So the first one, this is for US alone, but there's $28 billion lost annually to irreproducible preclinical research. The second box is always, I think this is the one that I hear the most. So 70% of researchers have failed to reproduce a peer's experiment. You get tasked that you need to start with another, so with something that somebody was working on 2 years ago, they left the company and you have no way of finding the data that they were working with. So that one is very common. Then the third box, 45% of data professionals' time is spent cleaning, not doing the science, right? So just extracting and tracking how the information works, where does it need to go. So this is a lot. However, I think this is going to change a bit with AI, but still data needs to be AI ready as well and cleaned before it can be moved and before AI can be let loose. And the last box, so the #1 theme within FDA warning letters to biopharma and medical device companies was documentation failures. Specifically in terms of there was a lot of suspicion on fabrications because things were edited post-mortem. There were audit trails were not, so were suspicious as well. So there were a lot of things that mentioned because of poor standardization and poor documentation. So interesting things that we learned, but they do make sense. So a lot of you also said that paper is the thing that you use the most. So I imagine paper does make data. I mean, it's hard to find data in 2 years or 3 years time. Also, I'm sure that people have bad handwriting, so that must be an issue as well. Okay, moving to the other poll before we jump into the other part of our webinar. So the second poll is, before we asked you, what are you using? Now we want to understand what's the challenge, right? So some of you mentioned paper, some of you mentioned ELNs, some of you mentioned Google Suite. We want to understand with your current system, what's the challenge that you're currently having? So let me just find and turn on the poll. Okay, you should have it on your screen. So there are a few options. Again, if you think something is missing, please share it in the chat. But we just want to understand, okay, so what exactly is the challenge? So if you're here, probably there are some challenges. Let us know so that we can understand this better. Okay, so this looks much more different. We have answers all over the place. The one that's okay, similar as the previous research that we found. So too much time spent on documentation. This is currently leading. And then we have hard to find, retrieve, or compare past experiments. So very, very hand in hand with what we found out when we were doing the research. And inconsistent data entry across team members. Okay, that one is something that I hear often as well. So people not following the SOPs even, or just how data should be input. Okay, so I'll let it open for a few more seconds because we're still getting answers in, but too much time spent on implementation is still leading the way. Okay, poor audit or compliance readiness. So I would be interested to hear were you already audited and you got comments and feedback, or is it just your opinion based on what you currently have that doesn't make you compliant or audit ready? That would be interesting information. Okay, let me end the poll and share the results. Okay, so as you can see, the number one is definitely too much time spent on documentation. 64% of you said that this is the thing that is the biggest challenge. And then we have hard to find, retrieve, or compare past experiments in the second place. And in the third place, inconsistent data entry across team members. And then actually we have quite a lot with poor audit and compliance readiness as well. So this is interesting, but makes sense as well. So it's terrible when you want to do more science, but actually you need to follow and do more on the documentation side. Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen, the poll, and let's jump into the sign out part of it. Before we go there, so one thing, and these are so symptoms is what you were talking about. So hard to find the data, retrieving the data. So these are all the challenges, but we see them more as symptoms. Actually, what does happen is uh, if you're not following standardization, if you don't do templates well, you're going to have inconsistent data formats. You're going to be missing fields. You're going to miss the SOP version control. Audit trails will be, so you won't be audit ready. And the last one, which is more relevant lately, is there will be some issues with AI automation. So it's not going to be completely blocked, but the data will have to be cleaned and readied up before AI can work with it. Okay, so the three pillars where we see Synod helps you have this connected lab data structure, and where our templates come into the picture is experimental workflow. So experimental workflow is the first part where, and we're going to talk about it, you're going to see it in a few seconds, is where it all starts. And then these experimental workflows include SOPs, include inventories, and all of that is connected. So the library of SOPs, the inventory items, what's being used, it's all connected within experimental workflows. So the three pillars we see are workflows, and then we need those. We have SOPs and inventories. So we're going to start with the highest data structure, so with the workflows. So experiment and workflow templates. The first thing, so this is going to be everyone who is using Synode or ever use Synode, this is very straightforward. You understand what you're looking at. So just a second, I'm going to take a sip of water. Okay, sorry about that, but I had a sore throat. It's better now, and I'm still okay. So back to what we see on the screen. So these are experimental workflows, and this is where consistent data capture starts in SideNote. So this is where you can start working with your templates, but specifically you can offer and provide your team with clear guidance. So everything flows. So you can see it goes from the highest layer, it goes down to the protocol. So everything is connected in a logical flow. These experimental flows can be duplicated. So this is one of the most important part. Once you create these workflows, these experiments, and these SOPs, each of them, so we have a few here, which are nonlinear flows, can be duplicated and then moved around. So you're going to be duplicating all the SOPs within that flow, and you're going to be duplicating all the results template and item templates. Then all of that is under strict permission control. This is one thing that we see our users forget sometimes when they're setting up an SOP system, or even if they use SideNote for a QMS. Permission control is very important, and permission control and granular access can be done within SideNote based on workflows from the project down to the daily task. So this is one thing you should be aware of, because it's a big part of standardization and making sure that data is reproducible. People should not always have access to everything. It does take some change management within the team for this to be successful, but it is an important part. Then the next part, so we are jumping in. So we went from the workflows and we are going slowly down to the lower layer where we have SOPs and inventory item templates. Okay, the first thing, it's less relevant for the templating, but it really helps you. So when you start using SideNote, you have the option to get your own SOPs and templates into SideNote quickly with our import with AI tool, which changes your current PDF protocols into SideNote format. However, the next part is where it gets interesting and the part that's important. So our protocol library, this is where you can have your SOP management setup. Why? So this is where we always suggest whenever a new user comes into SideNote, you should start with the protocols. Set those up, set your access control. So you can see you can have very limited access, who sees it, who can use it and execute it, and who can work on it. Each of these protocols, these SOPs, has versions. So you can track all the versions, and not just what the differences were in the versions. You can also always track back into what version was used when, by whom, and where. So this is usually even more important. So you can always trace back and make sure to understand what versions were used. And lastly, all of these protocols in the library are connected to the tasks and to the project management in SideNote. If we go into what the protocol would look like, so it has a few tabs. The first most important one, protocol, right? So protocol is a standardized experimental procedure with guided step-by-step execution. So this is something you need to have so that people can follow. However, this SOP can also have a template for results. So you can make sure that everyone is inputting results in the fields for consistent data capture, right? That everyone is using the same template for the results, so that you have this standard within the results, not just in the procedure, but also within the results. And lastly, you can have item templates as well. What this allows you and your team to have is, so you're using the same equipment, using the same chemicals and reagents, and now people know where is this coming from which inventory. And then if they open the inventory, you can also track the information, but this is already part of every SOP you create in SideNote. So ready to use equipment and materials for every experiment. This really allows you, as you can already see on the screen, to just design your entire procedure from the beginnings, from the creation until execution, and within one protocol template. Okay, and lastly, within the SOPs, okay, once you move out of the creation node, out of the library, you're going to be using SideNote usually in the execution node under the tasks. And this is where every user can then load the specific SOP directly from the library with a single click. What you get this long-term traceability, who used the protocol, what version was used, when it was used, and what was done. And then you can also set up a process where you can have, let's say that you are actually the one publishing and working on this template and optimizing it, you can save this as a new template into the library, and then this can then be used further on by other people as well. What this creates is, let's say in 2 years' time, I know a lot of you mentioned this in the poll, you want to find the data, what was happening, what templates were used in a specific experiment. Perfect, you can find this information and it's already in the library and you can reuse it and you don't have to start from the beginning. You don't have to waste too much time just gathering the data. It's much easier, it's already there and you can start working on it. One comment, if you have any questions during while I talk, you can also post those in the chat. We don't mind. So you can use the chat already during the webinar. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end, but feel free, so you don't forget them, drop them in the chat as well, and we're going to make sure to answer them at the end. Okay. To quickly do a short summary. So once you load the protocol template, the SOP into the experimental task, into the workflow, now you have ready to use inventory items, SOP steps are ready and people can follow them and execute them. And you have results capture, which people can also fill in and make sure they're filled in the same way across the board. Okay, good. So we started at the top in sign-out workflows. We slowly moved into the SOP library and then how that is connected with the execution phase. And now we're moving into the sign-out forums. So forums are actually part of protocols today. And what they actually look like, or where we got a lot of inspiration from, is from pharmaceutical batch records, electronic batch records. So they really allow you to have this structured data input. And they're a big thing, and people love them when the team grows and when they go further down. So pure research usually is not as happy using forums, but the further you move into development and manufacturing, this becomes much more important. Okay, let's go into the forums. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, forums actually allow you to design reusable digital forms, and they have multiple field types. So text, numbers, single choice, date and time. You can even assign items from the inventory, and they actually, so you can then embed those directly within the protocol or even use them in a standalone protocol, as I said, for batching, inspection, or even QA. And then you can see on the screen, so there's nothing else. So let's say a technician follows a certain form, they won't be able to edit anything, but they're going to be just able to input the information that needs to be input and nothing else. So really, when you're moving away from pure research into development, this becomes much more important and relevant. Good. So let's dive more into the forms. So a few things in the form. So you have built-in field validation also. And this really helps you just prevent data entries, right? So you can have, you can find outliers first and quickly out of spec values. So that's much easier. And this, again, part of the protocol, part of the template can be moved and used around sign-out. We only talked about how to get the data into sign-out, how to capture the data, but we didn't talk a lot about extracting the data, but this is also a big part of standardization. So data should be ready to be extracted so that you can use it within, I don't know, an analysis tool, or you can use AI to do some analysis, but it's really important that this data can be exported in a structured format. So this is where forums really come in and help you a lot. You can export all the information, full metadata of all the forums, and then you can do comparisons, you can do internal, external analysis, or if you need to do submissions to regulatory bodies, that's possible as well. So you get information that can then be reused and quickly analyzed in a much easier way if you're using specific software for that. We have some questions. Cool, Angeline. I'll look at it at the end. We saw the question, but we'll answer it in the Q&A session. Okay, so besides this, these forms do have some flexibility in terms of fields can be skipped. But what's relevant is, again, and this is whenever you're going to be audited, you're going to have this time step. So, for example, in this case, you can see that Drun skip this and mark this as NA. And again, if you are able to do this, and you're going to still be and maintain compliancy. Okay. Lastly, so if you remember, I talked a lot about this in the beginning. So our research showed that audit trails, that people had issues with audit trails. And I imagine this is more relevant with paper and probably with MS Office suite as well. So audits need to be, you need to trust them. And there needs to be, they must be reputable. So, and these are the audits in sign out, and they allow you that you have this trust that you can always see what were the old values, what changed. So this, for example, you can see on this screen, this is the built-in audit trail of the forum, and you can see exactly what was changed, what were the inputs. If you get audited, you can get this information out quickly and make sure that yeah, you can provide it to whoever requires it. So don't forget, it's important how to capture the data, but a lot of times it's very important to also be able to get this data out in a structured format so that it can be used or moved into a data lake, but really do something with it besides just having it captured. Okay. One of the things very relevant. So we didn't, and this was also mentioned with FDA warning letters. So the approval and electronic signatures process needs to be defined, and you can set up this in sign out. So we do have an option of electronic signatures and also approval system. First, within the library, you can make sure that people don't have access and that only have access. So you can see these screens are different. So people either have option to publish a certain protocol because they're the owner of them, or they don't. In this case, you can see Run doesn't have access to it. She can just view and edit, but not publish it because she's not the owner. So there's already a lot that you can do here. Besides that, Signout also allows you to create groups. Let's say you have a group for QA, a group for R&D, a group for downstream. So you can have a group of people with permission set up as well, and then just assign that group with a certain permission. So you don't have to do it user by user. You can say everyone in QA will be owner. They'll be approving this. Nobody else should be. Everyone else will just be the viewer. And then the signatures process in Signout. You can set this up on a task level. You can have a full approval system with the signatures, with locking of the tasks. And what it actually allows you to do, besides having this flow, so you can see what's in review, what's already done, you can have a system in place, a full process of signing and locking up tasks when they're completed and they have to be reviewed. So you can assign people, you can assign groups of people. So it really depends on you. This is where our customer success team would help you set this up. So what works in our experience, but really just making sure that you can set up the approval system in your place that's going to help you be more compliant and audit ready. Good. I'm going to open the floor for the third poll. So we want to hear, so just based on what we discussed now, we want to understand which one you find most useful. If there's something else you would like us to understand about the templating or something we should be aware of, put this in the chat, let us know. But we just want to understand if we're going to do another webinar in terms of this, what we should dive in. If we're going to do some content, we want to understand what's something that you see useful or you want more information on. So let me start the poll. You should see it now. So if you remember, we started with the workflows, then we moved into the protocol templates. Item templates were part of that as well, and results, and finish off with sign-out forms, which are really part of a specific protocol. This answer probably will differ based on your size, based on are you doing pure research or are you also doing development manufacturing, but really interesting to just hear what's something that resonates with you when using sign-out or just based on today's webinar. Okay, quite a few answers already coming in. So most of you currently talk about PAT templates, so workflow templates. Cool. No, I agree. I saw so much success our customers had with this. So just in saving time, making sure that people follow the same protocol. But one thing that was also obvious was when they got new people into the lab, they got onboard much quicker if templates were really well set up on the project experience and level and task level. So that's something that also I'm not sure if you think about it while using Signout, but you should be aware of this one. It's a big thing as well. Um, okay, item templates are less. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll and share the results. Okay, so most of you, or the majority of you, think and see workflow templates as the most useful one, so just enforcing consistent procedures. Okay, templates library. I agree. This one I think this is very useful, and I think this should be used in the first thing you should set up whenever you start using Signout. You should go into the protocols templates. This is what's going to be the bread and butter when you're setting it up. Results template. Okay, this is also I agree. So just making sure the data is exportable, and we have less answer for the item templates and Signout forums. Okay, good, interesting results. Let me stop share this and go to the next one. What we're going to continue with, I'm going to do just a quick summary. So probably it's going to be a bit shorter webinar today than usual, but we want to do a quick summary of what we learned, and then we're going to jump into the questions because actually we had quite a few already. Okay, so there are a few things that we want you to get out of this, and one is standardization through templates is the foundation of reproducible science. I know it sounds like a cliche thing to say, but it really is. Sometimes it's a burden because you need to set up the templates, you need to go through this, you need to have a version control in place and access control, but it's very important and it really improves your science at the end of the day. Your time to market is better, your people onboarding people is faster. So all of this is a big thing. So you should be using standardization through templates. As you can see, so I already talked and touched a little bit on this, but it's gonna turn your daily lab work into more consistent, trustworthy, and actionable data. So it's gonna be easier to find data. You're not gonna have as many issues with, oh, what did my colleague do 2 or 3 years ago? This becomes much easier. So less errors. Yeah, this as well, because people use and you can ensure they're using the correct SOPs, the correct items. One important information was that people were using outdated either so equipment that wasn't calibrated or outdated items. So this is also something that would with item templates be less would happen less often. Then making sure so standardization will help you be more compliant, faster and easier. And we squeeze this in, but AI ready data. So this AI is here and making sure that data is standardized will prepare you to be AI ready easier. So all the AI models out there, they do prefer data to be structured. And of course, so this is straightforward and makes sense, but just making your operation scalable. If you have a structure in place and consistent workflows, if you grow, if you're going to be scaling, this is going to help you a lot and it's going to be much easier to do. Okay, so I'm going to move to the questions and start with those that were answered a question both asked in the chat and in the Q&A. So the first thing is, so if we assign items on the protocol tab, should we also add them in the items tab, or will they be added automatically? No, Rami, they will be added automatically. So if you do this in the protocol tab, they should be in the items tab as well. So that's the part of it that I was explaining earlier. So we want the templates to include results template, item templates, and the protocol templates. That should be part of the same template. Okay, then we had a question, can I duplicate entire project? No, fortunately, currently not. So we'll reach out to you to just make sure that I understand it correctly, but projects cannot be duplicated, only experience and tasks. Then we have a question from Angeline in the chat. Hello. So when you're talking about users importing SPs, okay, so yes, and yes. So when I talked about users importing SOPs into experiments, yeah, you will be loading the template into the workflow. However, the entire workflow can have multiple SOPs. So it can be one SOP with different parts. So you can have a workflow with 5 tasks with different SOPs within them. but that's actually one entire SOP for you. So a workflow that you're going to execute and work on it. And then are the SOPs only for tests or can you have protocol for, yeah, as I said, so you can have protocol for the entire workflow that can be done as well. And again, moved around sign node. You're changing, I don't know, pH, temperature, perfect. You can just copy it, duplicate it, then reuse it somewhere else. Okay, then we have currently approvals are at task level. Is it possible to use approval at step level? Okay, Tamara. So let me check. I'll talk with the team and reach out to you. Making sure. So I think this is something that we have on the roadmap, but I'll double check with the product team. I think the last time we discussed the roadmap was 2 weeks ago, and we had this somewhere mentioned. So I'll double check. You could design the process in a way to do that, but you won't have signatures. Um, okay, so we got another questions in the meantime. The results forms were designed to act like SEMS, and not designed to okay. So yeah, so Signout as a company or as a product, it all started out as an ELN. However, based on the feedback we're receiving from the market, based on the feedback we're receiving from our customers, we are moving into different directions. So we are moving into, so we have some customers using Signout as a QMS, some of them use it as SDMS as well. So it's going in different directions. And yes, it's ELN plus SDMS slowly. It's also slowly becoming that. We also have probably covered 89% of LIMS features. So it really depends yeah. So short answer, Milena, yes. Uh, we can template entries. Yeah, so whenever you execute something on the task, let's say a template, that's gonna be connected to the materials in inventories as well, Aubrey. So yeah, it can be the template entries can be linked to inventory to track use of materials. And this is probably one of the most important things you should be doing in Signout. So connecting inventory items and materials with your experiments, making sure that you know what was used, how much, and what was the status of that item equipment at that point in time. So can permissions be set for groups of people, for example? Yeah. So I mentioned this, I think earlier. Yes, you can set up permissions for groups of people as well. Okay, so we have quite a lot of questions coming in, so always good. Does Silent offer a feature or specific template to provide background knowledge for our operations? For example, is there a way to embed context? Yeah, so yeah, so we have actually quite a lot of customers using Signout, even us. We use Signout, Signout's workflow for onboarding new people, teaching them how we work at Signout, what our processes are, and we use Signout for that. We even use it for meeting minutes, both on the sales team, CS team. So yes, you can do this. So what would be best is you can reach out either to your customer success manager or to me, and I can help you set this up and how that would be done. Okay, we have another question from Angeline. If an experiment broken down into many tasks is being repeated many times by different. So, Angeline, yeah. So I read the question a few times, just making sure I understood it correctly. I think this would depend. So you can have different users assigned to different tasks. So that's a common use case. So let's say you have task 1, 2, 3, 4 being executed by person A, task 1, person B, task 2. That can be done. So just by assigning them, and then they don't even have access to other tasks, or they only have viewer permissions. That's one way. If they're doing the same workflow in the same project, so it really depends. Are we talking about same workflow in the same project? Yeah, then that's going to be within one experiment. If different projects, then it's going to be the same workflow duplicated in different places under different projects. Um, or it's gonna be so maybe Angeline, I think this is I'm not sure if I completely understood the question. I think I did, but and I think the answer is yes, but want to make sure. So if you can, I'll paste my email in the chat as well. So anyone who has any questions that we didn't answer, you can reach out to me as well. And I'll just a second, I didn't input email into the chat. Everyone. So my email is now in the chat. So just making sure. So because I don't have your email, Angeline, but if you can also reach out to me, and I'll get back to you with more information. And the last question. So from Tamara, I would like to replace seal documentation with sign out. This will grant self-reported to the project leader. Since it's weekly. So report, yeah, I think so. Just based on Tamara, I think I would need to understand this question better as well. So yeah, based on what you said, I think yes. So this should be possible. You should be able to even create a report with the sign out, and so because you're gonna have it by task, and then you can do a quick summary and then discuss this with the project leader. So yeah, because reports within sign out or summaries within sign out can be per project. So I don't think this should be an issue. It does depend though, how are you using sign out and what your current process and setup is with projects. Okay. Aubrey, okay, another question. So are structure templates mobile friendly so lab techs can use tablet and enter data in real time without designated PC? So our web page is mobile friendly and tablet friendly. We do have some customers using tablets in the lab. The app currently no. So currently the app, if you're gonna use Synod's app, the mobile app, no, that one won't have them. While the web page will have them, and it should be. So the last time I played it, it worked well. It did depend sometimes on mobile. It was less good than on tablet, but tablet was usually quite good. I was using a iPad the last time I tried this, I think in October. I think we have, okay. I think we got a few more questions, but let me see. Okay, forums can forums have access control? Yeah, that can be done as well within the forums creator. So you can have the same permissions as with other objects in Synode. Okay, good. So I'm gonna slowly wrap up for today. There were a lot of questions. Any questions that you didn't get to will get to you either via email or as I already posted my mail in the chat, you can also reach out to me and I'll get back to you. If there's anything that didn't make sense today or something you really liked, please let us know. Reach out to us. We love to hear any feedback also in terms of what webinars you liked and what you didn't. Thank you, everyone, and see you at the next webinar.